finally live in a place of those days in Jericho, to hear rumors of this place, to hear stories of this promised land, only to discover that there's a padlock on this thing that God has for me. You see, could you imagine how it would have been to live vicariously in those days, to hear the rumors and stories of this place, only to find out that God, you have something locked up on this promise that you gave me. But however, the Bible teaches us that in the process of Joshua standing there confused over how he was going to get over this wall, how he was going to get around this wall, or even under the wall, the Bible says in verse 2, and the Lord spoke unto Joshua. You see, now please don't miss this, because Joshua is standing there thinking to himself, how in the world am I going to conquer this wall? And the Bible says that Joshua standing there looking at this wall. Verse 2 says, and the Lord spoke unto Joshua. You see, that excited me because of the mere fact that the Lord spoke unto Joshua at this point. Because when you look back into the history between God and Joshua, you will discover that every time Joshua had his back against the wall, every time in the book of Joshua when he didn't know which way to go, when he didn't know what to do or who to call on, the Bible always said, and the Lord spoke unto Joshua. Y'all don't believe me? I can show you better. I can tell you. If you look at Joshua chapter 1 verse 1, the Bible teaches us that when Moses died and Joshua was confused and didn't know what to do next, the Bible says, and the Lord spoke unto Joshua. Look at Joshua chapter 3 verse 7. The Bible teaches us that when he was standing at the Jordan River and didn't know how to cross the Jordan River, the Bible says, and the Lord spoke unto Joshua. If you look at Joshua chapter 4 verse 1, when he crossed the Jordan River and didn't know how to erect a memorial for God, the Bible says, and the Lord spoke unto Joshua. You look at Joshua chapter 5 verse 2, when God required the men of Israel to be circumcised and Joshua didn't know how to do that, the Bible says, and the Lord spoke unto Joshua. Look at chapter 7 verse 10. Here the Bible says Joshua was confused and didn't know why they lost the battle against Ai. The Bible says, and the Lord spoke unto Joshua. What you trying to say, preacher? I'm trying to say that in every chapter of his life, when he didn't know what to do, where to go, or how to do it, the Bible says, and the Lord spoke unto Joshua. And somebody today, oh God, some praise, because in every chapter of your life, when you didn't know which way to turn, when you didn't know who to trust, when you didn't know who you was going to go with, the Bible always told you, and the Lord spoke unto you. When you didn't know who you was going to marry, when you didn't know who you was going to get involved with, you ought to thank God right now that God always showed up giving you a word. Listen, listen, he showed up to Joshua and let Joshua know, listen, that shut up don't mean shut out. I know I'm talking to today, but somebody here may be looking for a job and maybe in between jobs. I want you to know that shut up don't mean shut out. Just because you didn't get it this time don't mean that there's something better that God has in store for you. You see, God wants Joshua to know that in the text that he didn't bring him 40 years through the wilderness and across the river to be conquered by this wall. So I want you to know today that whatever God has brought you from your past, he didn't bring you from your past to allow this to stop you. Whatever you're going through, in fact, that should have given you confidence. That should have made you stronger. That should have brought the best out of you. You ought to press the rewind button in your mind right now and give God some praise, because if God can bring you over that heartache, if God can bring you over that pain, if God can bring you over that time of depression, that time of layoff, that time of indecision, if God can bring you over that, surely he can bring you over what you're going through now. You see, he says to Joshua, you got to see it. I'm in verse 2. The word see is the key word in the text this morning. Word see is what's called in the active voice. And the active voice pictures the subject of the verb, which is Joshua, as accomplishing the action of itself. In other words, when something is in an active voice, it means that the subject of the verb must perform the action of itself, meaning that God tells Joshua, you have to see it. In other words, nobody can see it for you. That's if you want what I have for you. Your mama can't see it, your daddy can't see it, your sister, brother, pastor, can't nobody else see it. But if you want what God has for you, you have to have the ability to see it for yourself. But not only is this word see is in the active voice, but it's also an imperative mood, which means that it's mandatory for you to see what God has for you. See, I'm getting somewhere, because you're saying, well, God, why can't I secure it? And God is saying, well, why can't you see it? You've been asking God, why can't I possess it? And God is saying, listen, well, why can't you perceive it? And God, And I came to tell somebody today that you have to literally take the spiritual blinders off your eyes, because regardless of your past failures, don't allow your past failures to interrupt your future perception. Listen, don't allow what you already been through to stop you from where you're going, because I come to tell somebody today that the place, the desire is already prepared for you, but if you can't see it, then you can't have it. And I came to talk to the seers today. I came to talk to somebody who can see themselves coming out of a heartache, who can see themselves coming out of debt, who can see God turning some things around. I came to talk to somebody who can see God blessing their family and blessing their children. As a matter of fact, if you can see God doing all this, can you just reply with me and say, I can see it? I can see it. Listen, he tells Joshua, you got to see it. I know who I'm talking. I don't know who I'm talking to today, but if you want to see it, then you also got to hang around folk that see it. See, the problem with us a lot of times is that we got to check our circle, because most times, 9 times out of 10, there's somebody in your circle that don't belong there. Because I was told that if I'm the smartest person in my circle, that's not the circle I'm supposed to be in. Because the truth is that there's somebody in your circle that really don't want to see you do great. I'll go back to that. But listen. Well, in your leisure time, if you will, read Genesis chapter 37, because it tells you a story about this man named Joseph. And we all know Joseph. Amen. Because you're Pastor Fleming's church, so I understand you all are great Bible readers, and I don't even got to go into the story of Joseph. But one thing about Joseph was that Joseph, he hung around folk that didn't see what he saw. See, Joseph hung around dream destroyers. He hung around vision villains, and as long as you hanging around those type of people, you will never be able to see what God has for you. See, he tells Joshua, you got to see it. When he told Joshua to see it, he wasn't not telling him to see it in the natural realm, but he was telling Joshua, you have to see it in the spiritual realm before it manifests itself in the natural realm. You see, you have to see yourself with it spiritually before you can actually have it physically. And in order to do that, you have to be able to look beyond the right now and look into the not yet. You see, most of us got a problem with doing that, because when we think of right now, we think that the right now is all that there is going to be. You see, you can't look at me right now, because listen, my right now don't look like much, but my not yet looks better than my right now. You see, in fact, somebody kicked somebody to the curb prematurely because you kicked them to the curb based off their right now. But listen, baby, my not yet looks better than my right now. And if you're going to hook up with me, you have to look beyond where I am right now. You have to see where my tomorrow is going to become. You see, that's somebody's testimony. Listen, I want to be around people who can see what my tomorrows will become. You see, he says, Joshua, you have to see it. And something, in fact, when you look at this text, verse 2, God gives Joshua 3 things to see in verse 2. And boy, all 3 things are based upon Joshua's ability to see it. And I promise I'm going to get out of your way. The first thing he says is, Joshua, you have to see yourself occupying the place. Amen. He says, Joshua, I've delivered Jericho into your hand. Before the Lord speaks to Joshua in verse 2, notice that Joshua is fixated upon the problem in verse 1. You see, the problem are the walls of Jericho. Verse 1 tells us that the walls of Jericho was straightly set up. In verse 1, Joshua is looking at the problem. He's looking at these walls. He's looking at the problem. What shouts me about the text is, when the Lord speaks to Joshua in verse 2, he says nothing to Joshua about the problem, but he only talks to Joshua about the place. You see, God tells Joshua, I've given you the place. He says nothing about the walls. The walls are the problem, but Jericho is the place. He doesn't talk about the walls, but he talks about the place. And the reason he don't talk about the problem and only talks about the place is because when God has given you the place, he's already worked out your problem. You see, can I suggest to somebody today that if God ain't talking about it, you ought not to be talking about it. You see, we got stuff mixed up. We talk about stuff that God ain't talking about. If God ain't talking about how bad of a day he's having, we ought not to be talking about how bad of a day we have. If God ain't talking about your haters, we ought not to be talking about our haters. We got stuff mixed up. We ain't supposed to be talking about stuff that God ain't talking about. Listen, the place, the desire, it's already there. It's already yours. But if you can't see it spiritually, then you can't have it physically. Let's can I go a little further? He said it's already in your hands. Of course, Jericho wasn't physically in his hands, but God was speaking spiritually. And what the Lord was trying to tell him is because your hands are close to you, because your hands are attached to your body, he was trying to tell Joshua, it's closer than you think. Look at your neighbor and say, it's closer than you think. Listen, I don't know who I'm talking to, but I really feel that spirit in here that there's somebody, they've been waiting on something. You've been waiting on a breakthrough. Some money's been held up somewhere. But listen, I came to tell you today that it's closer than you think. Matter of fact, I can give you a testimony. You see, I'm a college student. You see, and as a college student, I'm sure some of you all in here big college students. And as a college student, you're always broke. Unless you was born with some silver or gold spoons in your mouth, you're always broke. And I'm always broke, amen. But listen, the thing about it is, I began to question. I said, God, I don't know if this is what you really want me to do. Because, I said, God, I got some associates that don't care nothing about you. But it seems like that they're more far blessed than I am. I said, God, I don't think I'm in the right business. I said, God, I need affirmation. I need to really know that this is what you really want me to do. God said, you need affirmation. I said, yes, God, because I got some friends who are on the elevator to success. I have some friends who are on the escalator to success. And I said, God, I even have some friends on a moving sidewalk to success. But I said, God, here I am climbing a ladder. I'm struggling, trying to get success. I said, God, I need affirmation. I really need to know that this is what you want me to do. God said, it's closer than you think. So one day I was driving in the car. God said, look at the mirror. I look at the mirror. He said, what do you see? I said, God, I still see things behind me. He said, look at the mirror again. I looked at the mirror again. He said, what do you see? I said, God, I still see things behind me. I was